And welcome back to the Most Accurate Podcast. My name is Anthony Stalter, joined as always by John Paulsen, my partner in crime. And John, we got a lot to get to, especially with the breaking news of the Christian McCaffrey trade. But how you doing today?
Doing all right. I updated lots of projections, which I'll talk about on the pod here, but it's been quite a morning.
Yeah, you were telling us before the podcast, you were basically waking up thinking about touch shares for 49ers. So I can only imagine how the morning went for you. But we will get to the Christian McCaffrey news in a little bit. We have John's Thursday night takeaways today. This week's biggest fantasy storylines, of course, highlighted by the Christian McCaffrey news that he's traded to the 49ers. I'll talk a little bit about Dak Prescott, injury roundup. Of course, our sleeper sneaky start of the week, and then get into John's sneaky starts as well as the breakout model. Let's start off with the Thursday night football game, John. You figured at some point we were going to get a high-scoring game on a Thursday night. The last two Thursday night matchups, one didn't even include a touchdown. You had the Colts and the Broncos. Bears and Commanders didn't fail to disappoint from a non-scoring standpoint, but last night the Saints and the Cardinals both kind of went off in the Cardinals 42-34 victory. A couple of things that I know you wanted to touch on. There's two storylines. One, DeAndre Hopkins makes his return. He catches 10 of 14 targets for 103 yards in that victory over the Saints. But Eno Benjamin, he rushes 12 times for 92 yards and a score. Also caught four passes for 21 additional yards. And I think the question now becomes, is he an RB1?
Yeah, is he the RB1 in Arizona? I don't think that we're quite to that level yet. I mean, he had and it's funny with these backup guys that they get the chance. It seems like everybody gets excited about them. I was a little bit excited about him last week, and he flopped. And then everybody's like, "Oh, he's terrible." And then the following week is when they actually have a good game, when they are able to start 2 games in a row or more. I still think that James Conner, if he could come back fairly soon, will come back to his typical role. I mean, they were using Eno Benjamin pretty significantly prior to the Conner injury, and I think he'll continue to play a role in the backfield. But I think they want Conner to be the number one. But the question is, when is he going to be healthy enough to play? He's got this rib injury. He was questionable game time decision for this game. And since it was a Thursday game, he's got the 10 days now to get healthy. I would expect him back. Now, I won't rank him anywhere near an RB1 level, but he'll be, RB2 mix, especially if we've got some teams on bye. And then I think Benjamin will probably be an RB3. I don't think we see a big shift in this backfield just because of this game. I mean, did well in one game and did poorly in the other game. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
And then Hopkins makes his return. He comes in right out of the gates. Now you got to keep in mind Marquise Brown was injured. He did not play. They acquired Robbie Anderson to be kind of the deep threat now for Marquise Brown, but he was just acquired. So it kind of set up perfectly for DeAndre Hopkins to have a big game and Rondale Moore to mix in as well. And I think both happened. But what were your thoughts with Hopkins back in this offense?
Yeah, I just jumped on to PFR to look at his snap share. They typically have it up pretty quickly, and 92% snap share for DeAndre Hopkins. And I think that was the one concern heading into the game was like, are they going to play him full snaps right away, right out of the gate? Like, what sort of shape is he in? It's a little bit risky with an older receiver to play him that much after extended football absence, but they did. He ended up with the 14 targets, 10 catches, 103 yards. And you mentioned Rondale Moore, just to touch on him. I think a lot of folks were expecting a bigger game out of him, and he only had 2 targets, 1 catch, 31 yards. Nobody had more than 5 targets other than DeAndre Hopkins. Benjamin was second with 5 targets. Zach Ertz had 4. So it really was the DeAndre Hopkins show. We might see this for a while now with Marquise Brown sidelined for a stretch.
All right, let's get into the biggest storylines now that could impact fantasy managers, including the biggest news of the day, and that Christian McCaffrey was traded from the Carolina Panthers to the 49ers. The NFL world thought that this could be a possibility, John, and lo and behold, he gets dealt, and I think it's an absolute perfect fit given Kyle Shanahan's zone scheme. The McCaffreys know the Shanahans very well, obviously, from Ed McCaffrey's days in Denver playing for Kyle's father. Not that that really matters from a fantasy perspective, but when it comes to just the fit, it's perfect. Carolina, we can get into them a little bit, but when you look at this from a fantasy perspective, what's the fallout for San Francisco, especially for a guy like Deebo Samuel? Does this help him? Does it hurt him, given that there's going to be some more touches that are spread around? What are your thoughts on the McCaffrey deal?
Yeah, okay. First, there's a lot of moving pieces here, so I'll just try to go through piecemeal. And if I forget anything, let me know, and Anthony.
Sure.
But as far as for McCaffrey himself, great fit. I moved him up in the rest of season rankings. He was already at 4 or 5, and I moved him up to 2 or 3. I think 3. Really good fit for him. He's joining a much better offense. He won't necessarily be the centerpiece of the offense, so there is some concern that he's not going to see that 25 touch workload that has supported him for so many years in Carolina, but the touches should be more efficient, more yardage on those, maybe more, scores, more touchdowns on those, because it's just a better overall offense. So I think it's a good move on the whole for McCaffrey. Terrible for Elijah Moore. A lot of us were holding him, waiting for him to come back here in a couple weeks. And, at best, he's the RB2 there now. And you're kind of looking at him as an injury attrition guy. I said Elijah Moore. I meant Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah. You got more on the brain.
Yeah, I got more. We're going to talk about Elijah Moore later. Elijah Mitchell. I've already forgotten his name. But he's looking at being more of a injury attrition guy. So he's a player you would hold like an Alexander Madison. Maybe there's a Dalvin Cook injury, and he, same kind of thing with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell at this point. I don't think he's going to see a whole lot of touches behind McCaffrey unless there's an injury. Jeff Wilson in the short term no longer looks like very startable. I think this week maybe you could still start him as a flex, but we just don't know, immediately. And I'll touch on that right now because I just mentioned it. This week it sounds like McCaffrey was on a flight today. They're tracking it on the interwebs. He's in Missouri right now. He's over your airspace, Anthony.
Oh, nice. I'll pick him up.
He's supposed to land, early today in California. I would assume that, immediately meeting and getting in for the walkthrough. And what I saw was reported was that he'd be in for a handful of touches, have a red zone package, for him. So I'm expecting about 10 or 12 touches in his first game. It's an important game. It's against the Chiefs. It's a big game. I don't think that they're going to give up all these assets and then not play him at all. So that really knocks what Jeff Wilson down quite a bit because he's sort of a volume-driven RB2, and now he's looking like an RB3. And then the impact on Deebo. So they're actually kind of similar players. You look at Deebo and Christian McCaffrey, really good pass catchers. Obviously good with the ball in their hands. I do wonder if this does take some of the rushing load off of Deebo. He has been had his rushing load scaled back a little bit in recent weeks. So maybe his upside is not as high as it was. He does tend to do very well with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think the Jimmy Garoppolo, move to him after Trey Lance's injury was good for Deebo. So there's, some good and then there's some bad for him. And then with Brandon Ayuk and, George Kittle, there's just fewer targets available. And this is already tends to be a run-heavy offense. We'll see if it remains that way because now you have another pass-catching weapon. You have a pretty good quarterback in Garoppolo. Do they maybe throw the ball a little bit more? And, the pie is bigger in terms of the passing game. So I think I covered everything with regard to the 49ers. Let's just talk about Carolina now because I think the big thing is, who is the lead back there in that backfield, and we don't know. Chuba Hubbard was the lead back last year. He was okay for them. His yards per carry was 3 point something. It was pretty mediocre. Pretty good pass catcher. He had a decent role as a pass catcher there last year, but not a great efficient player or anything close to what McCaffrey was. They went out and signed D'Onta Foreman, who had a good stretch with the Titans last year. He was over 4 yards per carry, bigger guy. So what I think neither player is amazing. So what we'll probably see is a committee with Foreman as the lead back, Hubbard as the passing down back. If Foreman takes off and is running really well, 4.5 yards per carry, looking really good, then he might see more of a rushing load and start to approach that 15 to 20 touches. But I think, in the short term, we're looking at 13 to 15 carries for him, maybe a catch, and then Hubbard sprinkling in for 6 to 8 touches, and some of those are going to be catches. And this is a bad offense, so you're splitting time with virtually no touchdowns scored. It's not a situation where you want to run out and get these guys. However, if you're in a big league, you need some running back help. I would pick up Foreman. I think he's a little bit better of a player. But really, it's, if you look at their snaps and touches this year, they're so close in terms of snaps. Touches are, I think, 12 to 9 or 12 to 7. Foreman in the lead. So just not a great clarity in terms of what this backfield is going to look like.
Before we move on, I do want to ask you, John, about DJ Moore. I selected him in one of my leagues, and it was one of those picks where it's like, he's best available. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I don't like his fit in the offense, and I didn't like Carolina's offense at all. But now they're calling him a foundational piece. Of course, you might as well say that because he's about the only talent you have now on that offense with McCaffrey in San Francisco and Robbie Anderson now in Arizona. Does DJ Moore's touches start to increase? Does his workload start to increase?
Yeah, I'm a fan of DJ Moore. I think he's a very talented player. I did think that this Baker Mayfield situation was going to be a quarterback upgrade for him, and it has not turned out that way. Instead of getting that early career Baker Mayfield that, he was pretty decent with Cleveland in terms of throwing touchdowns, a lot more than what Sam Darnold threw last year, better yardage as well. But just we've seen post-injury last year Baker Mayfield so far, it hasn't worked out. Can they get things ironed out? I don't know. They're going to start Walker this week. Mayfield is dealing with an injury, and then Sam Darnold is coming back. So this is what's happening. I think if you get Sam Darnold back, at least we know that he can support 1,100 yards in a season for DJ Moore, and that maybe would upgrade him, because it seems like the Mayfield move has been a downgrade for Moore. Mm-hmm. Now, he should see a ton of targets. I mean, you're taking Christian McCaffrey out, replacing him with Hubbard. I mean, Moore should really be the first read. You also have Robbie Anderson gone. I mean, really, Moore should see double-digit targets every single game and should break out of this slump just from volume alone. Even if he only catches 40, 50% of them, he should break out of the slump that he's in. So, and there's also the theory that he might get traded. Now, I know they're saying he's a foundational piece, but that might be a signal to teams to say, okay, you better, if you're going to come try to trade for him, you better give us a big offer, because we do value him pretty high. And if I were the Panthers, I don't think I would trade him. It depends on how quickly they're trying to turn this around. Yeah. He's a good player. He just signed a recent, new contract. So I don't know that they want to move him. I think this just seemed like a Robbie Anderson's and McCaffrey specific trades for them to try to rebuild around Moore and a decent defense and try to get their quarterback in the next draft.
Yeah. John, moving on to Dak Prescott. He's set to return this weekend for the Cowboys. I think the biggest question, though, is they won games with Cooper Rush just managing the game. Their defense is their strength. They got a couple of backs. I know that Ezekiel Elliott has not been the workhorse guy, but they've got a couple of good explosive players in Tony Pollard and CeeDee Lamb. Noah Brown's a talented young wide receiver. Do you think from a fantasy perspective, we see the Cowboys just start chucking it again, or do they kind of keep things status quo, knowing that they can win on the strength of their defense?
It's an interesting question, because last year we did see the Cowboys really turn pass heavy towards the end of the season last year. So, heading into 2022, you would sort of expect that same sort of philosophy as long as it's working. Obviously, we've had a quarterback situation for them, and they've had to manage and try to stay in it with Cooper Rush, and they did. So, I think coming out against the against the Lions, it's a great matchup. They're going to be able to do probably whatever they want against the Lions in general, generally speaking. I'm sorry, Lions fans. But this is one of the best matchups for all positions, in fantasy. So I don't know if they'll come out and start checking it. They'll probably try to stay balanced. Probably see a lot of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard this game just to sort of let Prescott get his feet under him. But I do have him ranked as a QB1. And I am optimistic that this is a big boost for this entire offense. I think they could look more normal. And, I think, Dalton Schultz has some upside now. And, you've got Lamb and Gallup and Noah Brown. It's a pretty good trio and everybody's healthy there. So you're hoping as a Zeke manager that, you get some more touchdowns and some more rushing touchdown opportunities. And I think the whole offense should be a little bit better.
John, the thinnest position in fantasy football looks to be more thin now because you've got two tight ends that could be facing, I don't know. Andrew says that he's just resting, but he does have a knee injury. Mark Andrews, of course, of the Ravens. And then Darren Waller of the Raiders. And Waller's been a big disappointment thus far. And he even said himself this week, he said, quote, "This weekend will probably be tough for me." So he's dealing with an injury. Doesn't look good. What's your advice for fantasy managers that have Darren Waller and or Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I'm certainly a lot more optimistic about Andrews. I have him in the rankings, and I do not have Waller in the rankings. Waller had that hamstring injury prior to the bye, and then is still coming out. I believe they had a bye last week. Still coming out injured. So I didn't put him in the rankings for that reason. And Foster Moreau is practicing, is more active in practice than what Waller's doing, which is nothing. So it's not saying a whole lot, but Moreau is a decent pivot. But there are quite a few streaming options this week. You can look in sneaky starts. I listed a bunch of them that might be available on the waiver wire. We're on pins and needles waiting to see if Mark Andrews practices today. If he's out, we probably should get some sort of report that says, "Oh, he's sitting again, but he'll be a game time decision," or he's sitting again, but he will play, or if he gets a limited session in. John Harbaugh said that it was rest. So, I'm taking him at his word at this point. And for Mark Andrews, I think it's reasonable that he sits Wednesday and Thursday if his knee's a little bit sore and they want to get him some rest.
And we will go over some sneaky starts a little bit later on in the podcast. Let's do our Week 7 injury roundup. And this isn't an injury, but I do want your thoughts on the aforementioned Elijah Moore. He will not play, according to the Jets. So he's been involved in trade rumors. So maybe it's a situation where they want to hold him out in case they do trade him. Amon-Ra St. Brown did practice in full. Jonathan Taylor practiced in full, so it sounds like a couple of key guys for fantasy managers will be returning. Damian Harris practiced in full on Thursday, so your thoughts on Stevenson as well, who had a big game last week. Keenan Allen limited on Thursday, but the Chargers do have a bye in Week 8. Mac Jones says he should be ready for Monday Night Football. Kenny Pickett cleared protocol and will start for the Steelers. They got the Sunday night game. DeAndre Swift limited on Thursday, pushing to play. J.K. Dobbins did not practice on Thursday. Tyler Lockett back-to-back did not practice. And then Rashad Bateman limited on Thursday. Jalen Waddle limited on Thursday as well.
Yeah, Elijah Moore, which situation's weird. I'm just going to put the positivity out there and hope that the Packers make a trade offer. They won't. I guess he's made a trade request, but they don't want to trade on the Jets. They view him as a foundational piece probably. As they should. He's a really good receiver. He's really talented. Would love to see him on the Packers. But they're just going to give him the week off, it sounds like, from a mental health standpoint. They don't want him playing this upset about his role, which is interesting. You don't see that a whole lot. So what that does for the Jets is, Corey Davis looks a little more appealing. Garrett Wilson looks a little more appealing. And if you're really desperate, Braxton Berrios should see a lot of snaps, and he's been pretty productive whenever he's played big snaps. You might see some Denzel Mims as well this week, which is unusual. Just running through some of those names. Damian Harris is interesting. He was doing a pregame workout last week, and it did seem like he was close. This is a weird deal with that, because we did get a report after his hamstring injury that this was going to be a multi-week absence, and he's coming back pretty quickly. We have him in FFPC. we're in a dire straits. It's either him or Latavius Murray as our RB2. And I think we're going to wait as long as we can. And, you know, if it looks like Damian, because he's full on Thursday, that's an indicator that he's going to play. So I would like to wait on that. What does that do to Ramondre? I've gotten to that question a bunch of times. Yeah, he goes from being a top 5 type play to a higher end RB2. This is one of those situations where he's played really well. It might have earned a larger role. And you have Harris coming off, you know, kind of gimpy coming off of the hamstring injury. Maybe they don't return him to a full workload. Whereas, you know, Harris is now, instead of being a pretty solid RB2, you're looking at him as a high-end RB3 type player, you know, in a good matchup against the Bears. And the Bears are pretty bad against the run. Keenan, I don't know. It sounds like he might sit another week in order to get the extra week of bye, which is tough for his managers, but probably makes the most sense for the long haul. He seems like he's getting closer. I got to update the projections for Kenny Pickett. Still have Trubisky in there. It looks like he's quickly cleared the concussion protocol, which is unusual. It seems like it's taking a full week for players to clear it, and he did it in less than a week. So it's just something to monitor. DeAndre Swift situation doesn't sound great. I mean, pushing to play, might play, limited, like just doesn't sound great, but they play early on Sunday. So we should know early on. And then, yeah, Tyler Lockett, we'll see what he does today. It's same situation as the Mark Andrews. Just waiting to see what he does on Friday. Bateman, I think, will be back. Waddle will be back. It does not look like Dobbins is going to play. I don't know if he tweaked his knee. Like, it sounded like on that turf at MetLife Stadium didn't agree with his knee, and they just shut him down. Now, I don't know if that means that he tweaked it and re-injured it, because it seems like, you know, sitting on Wednesday and Thursday, something happened. So whether he's able to get out there Sunday or not, he's not what he was prior to the Giants game. And so then you have Kenyan Drake and you have Justice Hill coming back. So they might say, all right, Dobbins, take the week off. We've got a couple guys that can, you know, deal with the load. And then you're looking at Drake as a pretty good sneaky start, we think, because it was Justice Hill that was actually playing ahead of Drake prior to his injury. So we'll see what happens there.
Drake looked good, though.
Yeah.
If you're Baltimore, with the way that he gave you that, I mean, a lot of it, he was just bouncing outside. I don't even think he was looking for a lane at one point, John. I think he was just like, give me the damn ball, go outside. But nonetheless, he was using the speed, and he looked explosive. All right, let's get into our sleeper sneaky start of the week. As many of you know, John and I use Sleeper for our fantasy league, and Sleeper is one of the fastest growing customizable fantasy football platforms in the industry. If you head to sleeper.com or download the latest app, you can check it out for yourself. But again, John and I have used it in our league over the last couple of years, and we really like it. So, John, without further ado, Sleeper's sneaky start of the week, and you're actually going with the Packers wide receiver here. You're just lobbying for more to come over from the Jets, but you do like one of your Packers this week.
You can never have too much talent, Anthony. And the Packers are just bursting with talent at the receiver position right now. But no, I do like Romeo Doubs. I think he's good. He's had a little bit of a quiet spell here. But he's seeing tons of snaps. He's playing over 90% of the snaps. He's seeing good usage target wise, and he is popping in the breakout receiver model for this week as well. He has 30 targets in the last 4 games. And then this is also a matchup play. The Commanders are 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to receivers. He's going to see a lot of Kendall Fuller, William Jackson on the outside. Jackson's dealing with a back injury. They both struggled in coverage. So I like Dobbs as an upside play this week. You know, wide receiver 3 type, especially in a short week with bye weeks. I think he's a good play.
All right, let's get into the sneaky starts. This is my favorite segment that we do, and this is just kind of an appetizer. If you go to 4for4.com, you can check out John's complete sneaky starts for week 7. He gives you multiple options for quarterback, multiple options for running back, wide receiver, and tight end. So again, this is just a small sample of what John offers in his 4for4.com column. So you want to make sure that if you don't have a 4for4 subscription, and you want to check out John's outstanding rankings as well as content like sneaky starts, again, make sure that you pick up a 4for4.com subscription today. Jimmy Garoppolo is one of the quarterbacks that you like. heading into this Kansas City game. And Kansas City, John, defensively over the last 3 weeks have not been good.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to talk to Josh and see if we can get you a Sneaky Starts T-shirt, because you do you
love
do
it.
compliment. Yeah, you love it. So I think we need to get you one. Maybe we could get one up on the site store.
I
I'd love
like
to
that.
see some Sneaky Starts T-shirts out there.
I'll just hashtag Sneaky Starts. I'll wear it in that. If we have different colors and things like that, I'll wear one every day.
You can have one for each day of the week, like underwear. It's free this week, by the way, this article. So if you're not a subscriber and just a viewer, you can go and check it out. Yes, Garoppolo, getting back to it. Garoppolo, the Chiefs are 29th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. They've given up a league high 15 passing touchdowns this season. The sixth most passing yards per game at 266. Garoppolo, for his part, has been solid as a streamer, 296 and 2, 253 and 2 in the last 2 weeks, and has cleared 16.7 fantasy points in 3 of 5 games this year. I would expect that the Chiefs are going to put up some points on this banged up 49ers defense. And I think that the 49ers are not going to be able to just ground and pound and try to control the ball. They're going to have to throw it. So Jimmy G is a good start this week.
And then moving over to running backs, well, we just talked about Kenyan Drake, but Kenyan Drake, and you highlighted it, and you handed out the qualifier here, in that Justice Hill was running ahead of Kenyan Drake before his injury. But again, with the way that Kenyan Drake looked last week against a very underrated Giants defense, I love this play as well.
Yeah, and the one caveat here is Gus Edwards. His window, I guess, doesn't close until Monday, so they could wait that long to activate him. But I guess he looks good, so he might actually be active as well. If he's active, then that makes things very interesting in this backfield with Drake, Edwards, and Justice Hill all active. Assuming Dobbins is out. So I'll just throw out, since we talked about Drake earlier, I'll also throw out Brian Robinson for the Commanders. Not a passing game guy at all. But the Packers are pretty bad against the run this year. They're 15th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, but they've given up the second most rushing yards to running backs, 719, which equates to 120 yards per game. And Robinson dominated the carries for the Commanders in week 6 with 17 carries into 60 yards and a touchdown last week. So I would expect something like that again, 60, 70 yards, maybe more, and with a pretty good chance at a touchdown.
All right, and then let's get to the tight end, Evan Engram. I know last week he was in our breakout receiver model, and I can't remember how he finished up. I think he was okay, but yeah. Evan Engram in what, John, I remember we used to highlight at least one revenge game a week, and this falls into the revenge game category, John.
Let's take a look at how he did last week. I think he did pretty well. 5 for 40 on 6 targets. So the usage is there. I mean, it's solid for what the tight end position is right now. You're basically hoping for that plus a touchdown, and then you really scored as a streamer. If you're streaming some of these guys, but I think the key with Engram is he's seen 16 targets in the last 2 weeks with 11 catches for 109 yards. And I'm sure he's talking to his positional coach and the offensive coordinator saying, can we get a red zone, target for me against the Giants? Players love to play against their old teams. And, some teams don't care about it when, running their call on their offense or whatever, but it does seem like they get a red zone opportunity, a scoring opportunity, because players love to score against their old team, especially if things didn't end on the greatest note. The Giants just gave up 7 for 106 and a touchdown to Mark Andrews. Obviously, that's Mark Andrews, but maybe cut that in half, and you got a pretty good game out of Engram.
All right, and then as we move on to our breakout receiver model, this is a system that John, you have kind of not taken over, but this is a model that you work with several other people on 4for4, and you've really turned it into not only an opportunity to look at the data, but also give some context behind it too at 4for4.com. But who's popping in this week's model?
Yeah, Jeff Hicks has taken over the article. I built the model with Kevin Zutlukel, one of our data scientists. Really, he's a really sharp guy. He was great to bounce ideas off of when testing this model. And this week, last week we had the Jamar Chase blew up,
Hmm.
and there's a few other pretty good plays coming out of it, but Jamar Chase was the big one. Diontae Johnson has appeared in the model a few times. I think it's a little bit dicey with Kenny Pickett coming back. Kenny Pickett seems to jive better with Pickens and with Freiermuth, but Diontae Johnson still is getting enough usage that he's due for a touchdown, basically. Mike Williams with Keenan Allen still iffy. I think this is a good week. Mike Williams is actually number 2 in the model with 12.2 fantasy points over the last 3 weeks. Expected 14.2. He has a good efficiency over previous 10 games prior to the span. He looks like a good start. And then the other guy I would like to mention, and I don't think I put him in sneaky starts, but Mack Hollins might be back with, back in the fold a little bit with Waller out. There might be a few extra targets. I mean, I think Hunter Renfrow probably benefits the most from Waller's absence. Along with Foster Moreau if he can play, but there might be a few extra targets for Mack Hollins, and he had some big games already this year. Not a terrible dart throw there with Mack Hollins. And
you want to check out the entire article for the breakout receiver models, make sure you go to 4for4.com. You can give us a follow at 4for4_John. I'm at Anthony Stalter. You can see it right there at the bottom of the screen. We'll be back next Friday for the Most Accurate Podcast. So everybody, good luck. We appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you're checking out all the great work that John puts together at 4for4.com. But don't forget, there's DFS, there's betting articles as well at 4for4.com, and the data that is collected and then kind of given out. If you're a DFS player and you're just looking to play the Sunday night slate or the Monday night slate or the Thursday night slate, we have articles that specify for that. TJ Hernandez does a great job with ownership when it comes to DFS, and of course John, one of the best in the business when it comes to his rankings each and every week. So we appreciate all the hard work for 4for4, and we appreciate you guys not only tuning into this podcast but checking out the content. So John, we'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Let's get through week 7. We'll tackle week 8.
Yeah, there you have it. All right, for John Paulsen, I'm Anthony Stalter. We'll see you next Friday on the Most Accurate Podcast.